Today we're going to give a introduction about the Salesforce development course. And before we're getting started, first of all, understand what's the importance of learning a development course in Salesforce and what actually it covers and how it is different from a admin. So we all know that Salesforce is a CRM tool, and where we have already some pre-built functionalities and already built apps where we can use, or we can build our own functionality as well. Now, where the second part, where we can build our own functionality, there it comes a different ways. One is point and click, one is writing a code. So point and click, what we have seen in the admin course, like we had multiple things, creating a custom object and custom fields. And if we need any kind of automated actions, like when you create a record or update a record, then if you want to do something automatically, like change some other fields or calculate some matrices, or like sending a email alerts. So similar kind of things, you can do some kind of automations as well. And you can build apps, you can create a new UI using lightning pages, where you have some drag and drop components, where you can add fields and all. So these are all where you're not writing a code, even though there are few like formulas or like validation rules where you're using looks like a code, but it's all like algorithm logics where you just do that operations. But uh, we are not dedicatedly writing a piece of code like um, all together a new file and compiling it, executing, and see if you give some input, what is the output. We are not doing all those, and we are just using a point and click in a the admin course, that what we have seen. So something that we had to have our own custom UI, or like the complex logics, like we have seen, right? Like when we have created or making any change to a record, we have created like workflows or process builders or flows uh, to update some other fields or calculate some fields, but which cannot be possible. That we have some business logic which are like complex, which cannot be achievable with this out of box features. All things with the point and click, we call it as out of box features of Salesforce, which cannot be achievable with the out of box features. Then we'll go for a custom code, where sorry, when we say a custom code, so that's what we're going to learn here. So let's see what are the basics. Now here, um, the first question, whether we need any kind of programming language background to do a development in a Salesforce. No? Yeah. Any questions?
Bala, we couldn't see your screen.
No, no, I'm not sharing any screen. Um, um, yeah, I'm not sharing anything as of now. So I'm just explaining the background. So, um, yeah, where we are. When you're saying a development, do we need any kind of a background, like any kind of a development background? Absolutely no. Without having any background, like any other programming language skills also, we can learn the Salesforce development. And if you already having, it will be add on to you. You will be easily understanding the basics. Fine. Um, Now, why it is required, like why we need to go for a development course. Well, already we have learned admin, and we need to, why we need to go for a development course. Why? Because like if you are looking for a job, or if you are already doing a job, So admin, or when you say like 100% functionality cannot be achievable with the with point and click and out of box features. There are some scenarios where you might need to go for a custom UI or a custom business logics using a code. When you look at a company prospector, they will if they hire only the people who know the administration, then they will hire one more person who will take care of a development, which will be like a double cost for them, right? So if they know the person who know the point and click out of box features well, and as well as they're also able to code, so it will be easy for them to assign or like get their job done with a single resource, right? So obviously they will prefer who has a development skills. So the ratio or the companies who look for the Salesforce resources, it's kind of 90 or 80 or 90%. They purely look for developers instead of admins. So it's always preferable, like if you are starting a fresh or if already doing a job, to know the skills or like to know the knowledge of how it is and what are all the things that you will be having in a development, what are all the capabilities of a where you know how to write a code and all. Now, is it required to gain the admin knowledge, like the administrative knowledge? Um, all are like similar only when I'm saying admin or configuration or out of box features, point and click, everything that what we have seen in the admin course, everything is the same. So don't confuse about that. So I'll make it as common out of box features. Okay. So do we need to know the out of box features to learn this course? Yes or no? The answer is yes. Why? Because if some business requirement came, we cannot, if you know the development, we cannot blindly go to the development and achieve the functionality. It is not the best way of doing it. All you know to know whether we can achieve this functionality using a out of box features or not. So if you know that, then it will be easy to maintain and easy to do when you're doing with the out of box features. Why it is easy? Like you know development well, and it will take less time for you. Like it will take 5 minutes when you write a code and complete the task. But maintaining it, like um, when you have a Salesforce production, or when you actually company working for a customer and they have their Salesforce instance and they give one feature or functionality to build, and you cannot directly write the code there. Why? Because it is not done by Salesforce. So Salesforce will not allow you to do all there. Salesforce have given a features which are like well tested and which will not cause any kind of issues, and they're giving that features where you can actually do in the production, or where some users already using your apps, and there are some other users also using your Salesforce instance, and because of your changes it will not impact much. They'll impact, but it's not a major like a block out for you when you're doing with the out of box features. But when you're writing a code, Salesforce is not testing your code, or they don't know like what is the result of your code, even though you are like a genius in doing it. But it's not a guarantee that it will work perfectly. So what Salesforce is doing, if you're having any kind of custom build, or you are building your own logics and you are writing your own code, then it's giving a different platform, not a platform, I say different environment. So when you have like we are having this a developer org, like what so far we did, right? So where we have like all this stuff. So first of all, where we can do a development. A thing was when you go to this setting wheel symbol, there you see a developer console. This is what is the place or a platform where we can do the development. So what we call this as a force.com. So this is where we do write our code and interact with the database, all things that you do as part of a development that you can do from this console. This is called a developer console, and how you navigate is from here. Okay. Still, like this is a developer org, right? So we don't have a different environments like kind of instance what I'm discussing now, like a production and their development and testing. We don't have a different environments when we're using a developer org. Developer org itself a kind of practice or where you can try out your logics or you can learn the things, everything in a one place. We don't have a different instance in a developer edition. So while actually the companies cannot use a developer edition. Why? Because it's a very limited resources. When you're saying limited, the size, the number of objects, the number of records that you can maintain, it will be very, very, very less when you compare to a organization they decided to use a Salesforce for this business. Easily they will get hit the limits. This is purely a learning purpose edition what Salesforce provides, and they don't have any time limit, so you don't have to purchase anything or anything like that. But the size wise you have a limitation, you cannot hold a more size of data in your developer editions. Okay, coming back there. So when you're saying environments, when Salesforce is using like some of the companies using a Salesforce for their business, and where we have implemented some logics and already some business users are using it, then you have like um, some new functionality has to be built. Then using a develop, I mean the code, then you cannot directly do it on your the production org, what we call it as a production org, and you will be having a development environments or development instance as well. So this development instances depends on your purchase, like what kind of edition you purchase. The orgs will different, but basically they are like four types, and we'll discuss all that. But remember that as like you will be having a separate instance where you do a development and you need to thoroughly test. And when you try to move that piece of feature to your production, it has to be like unit tested. There will be a concept called testing your code, again writing some code again to test your logic, and if it is giving a good result, and then only Salesforce will allow you to move that feature from your development to a production orgs. Okay, so there's some headache when you write some piece of code or implement something. You have a concept called a deploying from a development org to a production org. So this headache, and there will be some time consuming, and there will be some extra efforts you need to do, and it's not a one time. Even in future also, if you have some other changes, again you need to do the same thing, and 100% sure it will work also. You need to follow the same process. You cannot change any kind of code changes in your production instance. Always you have to do it in your development or like development instance, and you have to have a proper test coverage, and then only you can deploy to a production. That's why it's always preferable to do it out of box features if there is a way. If no way that you can not implement with out of box features, then only have to go for a development to best utilize the your Salesforce platform. So that's why you have to know the out of box features also, even though you are a developer, then only you are a good developer. Okay, so I think I have answered most of without guys are asking. That's why we need to learn the development in a Salesforce, and that are the prerequisites of your if you want to learn a development. Okay, before I proceed further, any questions? It will be good if you interact, and if you have any questions, then it will be like you remember. Good.
No questions, Krishna. Thank you.
Okay. Fine. Now, let's say what is the architecture? How, like, not only the development, how the Salesforce architecture is being. It's a MVC architecture. So if anyone aware of it or not, it's like a most common architecture in most of the platforms. When you're saying MVC architecture, it is a model, view, and controller. This is the architecture of a like how Salesforce platform works. Okay. So then what is the model, and what is the view, and what is the controller? So if you take any application, if it follows a MVC architecture, there's a three parts of it. So what is the model will consist of, what is a view consist of, what is a control? It's kind of a uh, three layered application, we can say. So now when we are doing a development, what will come in which layer? Now the model means what is your kind of let's say if you have application, so usually what how we use application, so it will make our life easier, and if you give some input, it will give us an output what we require. Let's say if you take a calculator, if we do some multiplication, subtraction, or division, you will give a numbers, and you will give a operator what you want to perform, and you will get a result, right? It's a simple thing. So if you take that as a thing, so what will be a part of a model? So the model will be what it will store the information, like or like what is the structure of it. Let's say if you're using um, student and school app, right? That what we have discussed mostly in admin. So there, the model means what kind of architect, or like what kind of structure you're having. Like if you take a student object, you have one object, and what are the information that you store, like a student name, roll number, and age, when they joined, and what course they're taking. All this kind of a structure what you're going to use in your database, that is called as your model. And so it's completely, we can call it as a database, or where you store all your data in your application. So that's going to be a model part of it as a database. So where when you saying a Salesforce, what is going to database? Are we are we going to use a SQL or Oracle or any kind of other where we are storing the data? All we are storing the data in a salesforce.com itself. The cloud is called a database.com, you call. But if you say anything like in generic, say in salesforce.com, in cloud only, we store all our data, or we configure all our objects, fields, everything in our salesforce.com databases only. So that is a part of a model. Okay. And view, what is a view? What actually the end user looks at is a view. What are all that uses to handle that UI part of a end user is a view. If you look at the admin course, what the view will consider, the layouts, or like what you call a page layouts, or like lightning pages, what you are use, everything to control the view of the end user is going to part of a view. And what are the controllers? Control means when a view, so in the part of view, when the user interacts to it, they will give some inputs, and either they do click or they do enter some data and they do submit. When they do all things, it will not directly go to the model. Before that, it has to handle some logic, or kind of it has to decide what to do based on the user inputs, whether they're entering some information or they're clicking on a button. You have to know, and if there is any kind of business logics, it has to perform everything it has to perform. And at final, either it has to reject back to view, or it has to send to a database, and you will send success to a view again. So the controller where you having all your business logics. So the example, if you say um, the validation rules and what you make the fields required, or like workflows, process builders, or like flow, what are all the automated things that you configured for your particular object, everything will come under the controller part. All the logics that will happen when you give some inputs from a UI. So if you visualize how it works is kind, what we call it as a model, what is a database, and where user do his interactions, it's called as a view. In terms of what we can say, some examples is your page layouts and lightning pages, everything where they used to interact. Okay, and now if they do anything here, and it will not directly go to the model, in between we having a controller. Controller, all your business logics will be part of your controller. So now when the end user, so first of all, when you load a page or click on any tab, so what will happen? So it has to open up some information, right? So when you do some request, so when you do some request, it will go to the controller and it will identify what is your request, and it will go to the database and pick your request, or like process your request and identify what needs to be written from the model, and it will give a understandable command to your model, and then your model will return you whatever requested by the controller. For information or processed information that is already stored in the database, it will return, and the control logic will take that information and return back to the view, and you will be able to see, or like it will make that understandable, or like what you will having as understandable view. It will send the logic, or like send that information to the view, and so that you will be like saying, like when you click you will get some information. It will not directly taken from directly from the database. It has to be processed, and it will fetch from the database, and finally it will be getting from the database only. And when you do some operation also the same way, when you edit, and then it will change to edit, and if you make some changes and do submit, it will be requested to the controller, and if you have any logic, it will process, and finally it will save to database. And once you save to database, it will come back and show your success messages or error messages, anything. If you have any error messages, it will not go to the database and it will show your error messages. Okay, in development, what things that we are going to learn as part of MVC architecture. So there in model, still it's going to be your database only. We don't have any control there. All we are going to do is interacting with the model only in your hand. So in a point and click, you will be having some uh, business flows like a workflow, process builder, and flows where you can interact with the database. And where in development, we use a concept called Apex, the programming language, which will be similar to a Java. Um, and it is a programming language, and which it's a programming language, and where usually, like when you learn, if you have any kind of programming language background, so when you have to compile the code and when you write the code, you have to install the package, right? So if you are using a C or C++, you have to install that a compiler and programming language. Then only you have to go to that platform and open that, and you can write that code and you can compile it. Similarly, we don't have any such tools to execute your Apex code. Where Apex can be executed and compiled is only in a force.com servers and force.com platform only. Where when you write the code or save there, then only it will be compiled, and the compiled result will be stored in your model or database. And whenever the end user using it, it will be use that compiled code, and it will take the inputs and give the result to it. Okay, so the Apex programming language is um, compiled and stored on store means like you can store in your normal notepads also. But when you write a code and you want to do compile and make it work, it can be done only in a force.com servers. So where we write in technical, we say like we go to developer console and we can write the code. This is only the place where we can write the code. Okay, I am not comfortable here and I want some other tool where I can easily write, like there are so many tools like Eclipse or a uh, uh, Visual Studio Code, or like we have Mincemeat, I guess, and we have IntelliJ, or there are different tools which will help you to write the code, and obviously, or like finally, they come and save into the your Salesforce database only. But there are tools where we use them to write the code, where it will be like kind of auto suggestions or auto formatting of your code, and it will be speed and maintain your code easily. So there we use those tools to write your code if you are like already using some other technologies, and where you write your code. Similarly, we can use for Salesforce also, but still you are saving your code to your force.com only. You are not storing in those tools. Those tools are just like intermediate, or like where it will um, looks familiar to you, but obviously it will go and store in your database only. Okay, now we have seen what we're going to use in controller as a Apex, and is a programming language. That's what mainly we are going to learn in this course. And if it is a controller, what about the view, where we are going to show to the end user, and what kind of thing that we are going to cover the view. So we had a classic version of development called a Visual Force. Visual Force pages usually they call, but the technology called a Visual Force. Visual Force also a mock-up language, which will be similar to your HTML, where we built a mock-ups or a UIs. It will be similar, not exactly. So you'll be having open tags and closing tags, and where you have mentioned what kind of input you are giving, or it's a button or input, text or drop down or radio, everything that you will define over there. Let's say in HTML, how it will be. You will be having HTML open tag and HTML closing tag, and if you're having some header, and inside that you will write like h1, and you will close them h1 tag, or like you will be having any paragraph, then you'll start. So there will be a tags that you're going to use like open and close, and in between whatever you have, you will be enter there. Similarly, in Visual Force also, you'll be having a similar kind of a syntax, and where you'll use for a visualizing your UI. And there will be some standard tags that are dedicated for a Visual Force, and where Visual Force also compile and can be stored only in a force.com servers. And it's a mockup language you can use. And there's a other term also called Lightning. So Lightning, now it's having like a two parts of it, like Visual Force, usually like when they're having a classic version of it. So sometime you remember there is a classic and Lightning version of your org. So now, like if you're recently signing up, everything that you look like will be similar to this one. But few years ago, like when, well, around 2016 or before, you will not having this kind of UI and look. Salesforce has started with a different UI called a classic UI. So there, the UI will be not this much rich, and it at that point of time it looks at outdated, and they have upgraded to a, not upgraded, they have changed their experience to a Lightning. And um, when they are before 2016, if they have any kind of a custom UIs they want to build, they used a Visual Force. And still now also you can build the UIs using a Visual Force. So the default UI will be similar to this pages when you build something with the Visual Force pages. Now, um, when you have something over here, so if you want to build something similar to a Lightning experience, if you want to build anything similar to this kind of a UI and experience, then you have to go for a Visual Force page, and there are like thousands or lakhs of Salesforce instances or orgs that are using a classics at point when they introduce Lightning. So they're not completely removing this. They are still holding this UI, and still they're supporting a Visual Force page. And you have to learn Visual Force as well. Why? Because so many of, like when you are joined the job, you are not guaranteed that you're always going to work in a new projects, right? There will be existing projects where you need to support them, where you need to enhance them. So to do that, you have to learn this Visual Force as well as a course, so that then only you will understand that, or you can make changes, or you can at least translate that Visual Force to your new thing called Lightning experience. Okay, so if I want to build something in a Lightning experience, what, how we can do as a Lightning. So what we build in a Lightning is Aura components. So what is Aura components? It is also similar to a mockup language. It's not only the mockup, it's a combination of mockup language and a client-side controller using a JavaScript. But it will not directly run on the Salesforce, and it uses a Aura framework. That's also like taken from the Salesforce only, and it will use the Aura framework and make that Lightning experience. And once you have a mockup done, it to interact with the sales, or so interact with the, so if you take a Visual Force, sorry, I'm just stepping back. If you take a Visual Force or Lightning Aura components, anything you take, so this is only the view part. When you have the view, so what it will happen, what you can see as a end user only, you can do here. All you control here is the UI part. Once you have some requests, it has to communicate with the controller and database, right? What will be the controllers and what will the database? Still, the Apex is going to be your controller part. And again, the database is model. And again, this Apex is going to communicate with your database and models only. And this view parts will communicate with the model to reach the model, sorry, to reach the database and get your outputs. Okay, so Apex programming language basically used to process your business logics and interact with your database. And wherein your Visual Force page and Lightning and Aura components, and there's a new concept, one more they introduced called LWC, Lightning Web Components. All this used to give you the provide the user experience. And it's going to end in a few seconds. So please join back on the same link and we can continue there.